And the music's not playing, so here we go. Hello, I'm David Bradley, aka Schizophreniforms, and today we are featuring the lovely Mr. MC Marc Faithfull. Good friend of mine for a number of years. We've worked together on various musical collaborations. We've also bonded over shared spiritual experiences and hallucinatory experiences, and generally been partners in crime for a long time when it comes to self-expression and self-discovery.
Yes.
Which is about as succinctly as I can describe our relationship.
Sounds pretty accurate to me.
Yeah. Is there anything further you'd like to add about yourself? Anything notable? Such as on the bottom of the screen that I'm pointing to here now, that's Mark's SoundCloud page for his music. But is there anything else you might want to add?
Oh, not really.
Okay, cool. Okay, well that saves some time.
All right.
So, earlier on, me and Mark over Facebook were having a discussion that, as things often do when you're in conversation with me, resorted around to my spiritual experiences and ended up revolving around, because we were loosely discussing non-dualism, because as in general, and you've written a song actually recently that is, the lyrical content's going to be about non-dualism, so I'm guessing that's something that's been of interest to you lately.
Yes.
And that you've been sort of exploring. And then in my own self, I've been exploring my concept of enlightenment and how it correlates and differs from my psychotic revelations, my schizophrenic experience, and the correlations and differences between those two things. So I'm going to start by asking you a few things. What is it specifically, the subject of non-dualism itself, that's been drawing your interest? Or what have you learned about it?
Well, it was something that I'd come across before, but I've recently been reading a book called Biocentrism.
Ooh, that is a subject I'm very interested in. Tell me more about this book. Who's it by?
I would tell you who it's by, but it's Robert Lanza.
Robert Lanza, I know that name. That's where he's the guy I saw a talk by him about biocentrism.
Yeah,
and that has greatly contributed to my. I'll let you talk about it more, but I'm just saying that the idea he presented, the worldview he presented, and the nature of the universe and how it sort of gives a rise to naturally occurring consciousness or something to that effect. Like it's. I'll let you talk about it, but that validated a lot of things that I sort of felt, but didn't have the words for, and I'd never heard a scientific explanation of it that was rational or not just spurious hippie nonsense, basically. So maybe tell us a bit about that. Like,
yeah. Well, I think one of the prominent things that he addresses is in science. Lots of scientists just say that everything started from the Big Bang, but that's not really an answer to the origin of the universe.
like the old question of like I would say, like, even God has a God. Like, if the Big Bang occurred, where did it occur? That sort of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Go on.
What's before it, and yeah, if the universe started from the Big Bang, then that's a direct comparison to God, because God apparently was before anything existed.
Yeah.
So therefore, he's outside of the universe.
Timeless.
He's
Beyond
separate.
space and time. Yeah.
Yeah. But
And
yeah,
that's part of his theory, or is he just making a comparison?
no, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, cool.
It's like it's kind of for science to only stop at the Big Bang is kind of like the concept of God it's like it's not looking any further.
Yeah. So one thing that occurs to me when you said that was the conversation I was having with Eddie quite recently, which was roughly bracing the idea of infinity as like an actual, like, actually acknowledging the concept that there is no end or beginning to existence. There's no way you can shrink down far enough that you find the nothingness at the center. There will always be something there. And similarly, going outwardly, because this universe exists, because the evidence we perceive it, even if that's an illusion, the illusion itself must be infinite. that it can't exist in nothingness. Nothing is impossible, basically. That was something that me and Eddie were talking about quite at a great length, and it put us in quite an interesting altered state. Like actually considering it as a more than just a concept, but actually like a reality.
What in reality of infinity?
Yeah. So like rather than thinking, so the universe, right, the solar system is inside blah 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 blah. The universe is inside the multiverse, but then where's the multiverse? Are there a multiverse of multiverses? Like, is this reality itself is, by virtue of our existence within it and the ability to perceive it, the only logical explanation is that it just doesn't end, and it's a lack of capacity of the human mind that we can't conceive of that.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? That limits us to these perceptions.
Yeah, I come to the conclusion that infinity makes the most sense, even though it's incomprehensible.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I suppose like in quantum physics and like in biocentrism that Robert Lanza addresses is how things are in a potential state before they're observed.
Yeah.
So it's possible that there is infinite possibilities before it has become definite.
Yeah. There's also the possibility that, like, say you have, they talk about parallel dimensions or parallel universes or multiple universes.
Yeah.
It's possible that, like, how, so I was thinking about this the other day as well. Like, if you've got an atom that was part of the Big Bang and it's theoretically in superposition, and that is the universe. That one individual atom is in superposition, or the electron, or the most fundamental particle of it is in superposition.
It's
Therefore,
it's what George Carlin calls the big electron.
Okay, cool.
In his stand-up.
Okay, go on. I haven't seen it, that particular.
He says he likes to refer to the universe as the giant electron. You have to see it.
Okay.
But
yeah, it led me to the idea that maybe this infinite potential. So until observed at the quantum level, I mean, I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to profess scientific knowledge, but by my limited understanding of it, if there is such a thing as infinite potential that is expressed as a manifestation when observed, it could simultaneously be in every point of all those infinite dimensions as well. Like, it's not just do you see what I mean? Like, that one particle that is in the center of the Big Bang could not only be the whole universe in superposition, but it could also be every layer of infinity equally, just because it's not, until it's observed, it doesn't have substance. It doesn't have a particular matter-based, or do you see what I mean? Just a weird thought experiment. It doesn't necessarily. I'm not a scientist, but that's the sort of thoughts that I have about things when I hear about quantum entanglement and superposition and stuff like that. But I'm not a scientist, so I can't verify whether that's accurate. But that's how I reflect on it.
Right.
And again, everything is infinite, but it's also a singularity.
Yeah.
And that's where we get this idea of oneness, which leads us nicely into non-dualism.
Yes. So the reason I was talking to you about non-dualism before is because in Robert Lanza's book he's referring concepts to like Buddhist and Hindu.
Sorry, there's a really loud scraping noise in the background.
Yeah, I can't do a lot about that, I'm afraid.
Okay, no, it's cool. I just wondered what it was.
It's Elmina on the knitting machine.
Oh, well, that's all right then. No worries. At least it's a productive noise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The only thing I could do about it is to plug a microphone in so that the sound is more directed.
Nah, fuck it. It'll take ages and change. We'll have to start the video again. What were you saying? So non-dualism. Robert
Lanza's talking about like obviously ancient wisdom from Buddhist and Hindu concepts of Advaita, which is non-dualism. It's the relationship that the observer has with the observed. So the internal self observing the external universe isn't a separate thing. There's no
like
separation.
Self and other, like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
But it's all one being, but it has this dual illusion.
Yeah.
A bit like the ego and the self, or the self and the non-self, if you see what I mean. Like, if you were just the pure point, like Ken Wilber talked about in the Atman Project, about the ever-present witness. If you could really irreducibly move yourself back to that point of witness, you would be able to observe all phenomena arising and have no association, but you would never be able to witness the witness.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because you are looking from that point of origin.
Yeah.
So you can only observe the other.
Pure like conscious observation.
Yeah.
Without So yeah. So the non-dualist concept is the realization that you are have a relationship with the external world inextricably, and that the reason it's called non-dualism, or as opposed to
like a lack of dualism, like oneness rather than non-dualism. Do you see what I mean? Is that what you...
Yeah, I think it's well, I know sort of what I'm saying, but again, it's a difficult.
It's hard to put into words.
Concept, yeah. I know how to talk around it.
yeah. It's one of those things. I've been exploring a lot of these concepts. So I've got extra vocab that I didn't have previously.
Yeah.
So I can be articulate, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm in that place.
Yeah. Yeah. But
because it is indescribable, it is ineffable. Like that, if you're coming from a place of no self, of true enlightenment or true oneness, that you don't exist. There's nothing to perceive, and there's no perceiver or perceived, because it is all one. So how can you describe through the medium of the mind? How can you verbalize and give descriptives to that which is insubstantial, that which is formless? That's me trying to do what I'm just saying in the sentence isn't possible to do, which is to describe the ineffable.
Yeah. You can't describe ineffable.
Yeah. And like they say with Taoism as well, it's like, if you like, one of the things in Tao Te Ching, he's saying, like, if you can describe the Tao, if you understand the Tao, then that's not the Tao.
Right.
You can either be it, but as soon as you try and translate it or grasp it or hold it or intellectually process it, then that's not it, because it's not fathomable. It's like we were talking about infinity earlier. The infinite itself is inconceivable to the human mind, and the only way to accept or experience that is to be it without. Do you see what I mean? It facilitates, by its very nature. Once you have that experience, you can only guide people to it. You can't like show them it. They have to experience it. Things like that. That's something that's come up a lot in what I've been reading.
Okay.
So yeah, I sort of waffled a bit there. Go on.
No. So I don't know, to like relate it in a kind of guidance way is is if you believe in dualism, it can create problems for you in your health, because you, and especially mental health, and searching for happiness and like love externally, because I think the non-dualist concept is telling people to look inside. Like the purpose of meditation is to kind of stop looking for gratification and satisfaction externally, and realizing that you are already the external, because you are there is no dualism, there's no other.
There's nothing that, there is no other. That's what I was gonna,
all of your happiness is already there inside you. You just have to remember that you shouldn't look externally. And I think the Buddhists call it samsara, when you are stuck in a perpetual state of trying to find satisfaction and pleasure and happiness externally.
So I was thinking about this concept earlier, actually. I'm glad you mentioned samsara specifically.
Yeah.
Because and it's something that came up a while back when I was reading, I can't remember what book, but it was a book about Buddhism, saying that samsara and nirvana are interdependent. Because if there is just oneness, if non-dualism is a fact, and the fundamental nature of the universe, samsara and nirvana are the same thing, or at least aspects of the same reality. So there must be something to escape
Sides of the coin.
in the first place for there to be a point in escaping. It wouldn't be liberation if there wasn't something to be liberated from.
That's true. Yeah, and opposites are always true. You can't feel happiness without sadness.
They give context. They give a way to have any kind of meaning. That's almost why dualism is necessary for the universe to exist. Because if theoretically, if you were completely non-dual in your perception, you would become one with everything, and your identity, your personality, even the self, even everything that even your point of observation would cease to exist. It's almost like...
And is that the concept of Brahman and Atman?
So with Brahman and Atman, the idea that Atman, I think you probably know this, but Brahman is that integrated state I was just describing of non-existence. Just total oneness and absorption with no personal identity. You are God, effectively. That's entering to Brahman, which you can, as far as I gather, you can only do post-mortem. But the Atman is like the individual soul slowly getting closer. I think you've read the Atman Project, so this is where I got this description of it. But the Atman is like a further and further and further and further and further, as far as you can stretch before death, where you accept that your godly nature. It takes that moment of death for you to be relinquished into God and to truly become God. But from the Atman perspective and the Brahman perspective of Hinduism, the Atman is like a copy. It's a variation. It's as close as you can get to being God when fully realized, without actually dying, without actually ceasing to exist. It's a copy. It's a mimicry. It's a reflection, if you will, of God. It's not God. It's just it's God in you. Yeah. And then, so the idea behind enlightenment, and then so Brahman and Atman parallels with enlightenment, and so Zazen and supreme enlightenment. If you see what I mean, I find them almost interchangeable in my understanding of them, roughly.
Okay.
So you can have an experience of divine revelation of profound oneness, but still behave like an arsehole and not acknowledge your own behaviour because you've been lifted up into a visionary heightened state. But then it's like a disowning process when you hit Zen, the Zazen level of that instantaneous, sudden fulfillment of enlightenment. a lot of is discarded, a lot is put into the shadow, a lot is suppressed or just merely let go of and disowned.
Mm.
And then when you re-embrace that, that's where you become a Zen master. And then where you come to integrate those things that previously you disowned because you'd reached a state of bliss. So that's enlightenment. Supreme enlightenment is to cease to be a part of the physical universe. Basically, that's how I sort of can relate to it or try and explain it.
Is
Like,
that after death, or whilst can you
so
achieve that?
I think the idea is that, like with the Atman, where you get as close as possible as you can to submitting to God, but you can only fully return once your body dies, because then it releases your spirit or your soul or that Atman back to its true nature. So you can attain that, you can be ready for supreme enlightenment and end that cycle and reach enlightenment, and then when you die you will reach supreme enlightenment.
Right,
That's
yeah.
the kind of thing.
But then most souls, they believe, get afraid of that level of enlightenment and come back to Earth.
Yeah, or like even if we only have one life, like the universe itself is cyclic. These things are playing out in some area of the universe again and again and again because of the infinite nature of it. Like, and even if it's just this one life that we have, I don't know. I'll read you something I was writing to Eddie earlier, because this sums up my feeling about enlightenment in general at the moment. Because, as I was saying to you earlier, I feel like I had the offering of enlightenment, but I wasn't ready for it and rejected it, and that's when that resistance to accepting God and non-dualism in my own consciousness, and that attachment to my own identity and unwillingness to basically die, not necessarily supreme enlightenment, but to attain that initial state of full bliss and integration, I fully wasn't really ready to embrace that or even accept that was possible, that I could have that. And that's what created all this pathology. It's what Ken Wilber was talking about in different levels of castration, where like you reach a certain level of development, but you're not able to allow what previously your identity was to die away, and thus that castrates you and sticks you and creates pathology at a certain level of consciousness. So while it's almost what schizophrenia is. It's like being in two places at once, two states of mind at once, and not being able to reconcile them.
On to the past, or not being ready to move to the future, or
I think in my case it was almost as significant as not being able to accept that I died, because as you know from your own interaction with me, I thought I'd died and gone to hell. And the reason I perceived it as hell was because I still existed and everything else ceased to exist. So it was like almost the inverse of enlightenment. Right. It was like, because I rejected the enlightenment experience that I was having so powerfully in my, because I wasn't ready for it, I went the opposite end. I went, do you see what I mean? And even if that's speculative nonsense that's not necessarily empirically true, like I was saying earlier, that's what it felt like. And the story, the narrative, the perceptions I had, it definitely seems more realistic based on my experience. Like, if I was to just accept my experience as it was, that would be a perfect explanation and actually seems very real as to what it is. But then, even that same thing that rejected the Enlightenment, that attachment to my own identity and personality and existence in this world and not letting myself die, even if it was just egoically or at the level of the self, and to attain enlightenment, that was what created this pathology, because I spent my life running away from these experiences that were actually the saviour of me. And it's an interesting parallel, even if it's not accurate. So I won't read what Eddie said, but he was saying about the idea that if the Buddhists are right and you just endlessly suffer until you attain enlightenment, then you need to analyze it and address it and actually face that, because otherwise it will just go on forever. That was roughly what he was saying, but I don't want to repeat his personal words. But my response to this was, it occurred to me that the desire for the end of suffering might also be an attachment. that enlightenment is intimately linked with the cessation, so the ending of desire, as far as I understand it, and to offer a concept that even if you don't attain enlightenment in this lifetime, or even in several, perhaps the lessons or experiences you develop along the way are as equally as important. So to use sex as a parallel, right, quite a graphic example, if one simply wants to orgasm and release, they tend to masturbate, as it's the quickest route to release. It just bang. Within most people, if they're well experienced, know how to make themselves come very quickly, and it's just bam, 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 release, and then it's done. It's almost like a practical thing of release. Whereas for sexual or other forms of personal, intimate, or even psychospiritual communion, it can be equally, if not more, gratifying than the end result of the release. And in some cases, the release itself, while satisfying, can be a bit disappointing, because the pleasure and vulnerability and the intimacy soon ends after you've actually... So when you reach that peak of, and then you release, then that sensation of communion and selflessness and absorption is gone. So
it makes me think about it's not about the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah, and it's become ever more poignant to me, that exact statement. So I further said, all too often we crave the desire to repeat that communion, simply because, like we were just saying, it creates a deeper state of connection. And perhaps we might not even be able to see the wood for the trees, in that perhaps the enlightenment itself, and this comes back to what I was saying about Samsara and Nirvana being inextricably linked. They're part of one continuum of reality. They're part of one greater whole. The enlightenment itself is contained within this reality. This is my postulation of it. That we're already in God or the divine, but the libidinous, so pertaining to the drive for life, the desire, as Freud would call it, the fundamental burning desire of life, or like eros, to avoid pain, distracts us from the true purpose of this existence in this reality, which is to experience pleasure and communion with this reality, as well as the suffering. So to fully absorb and accept and experience everything that's there. But the desire to escape suffering makes us not acknowledge all the potential bliss and joy and happiness that can be present when you're in this reality and awake, when you're self-realized, or when, you know. And I said, basically, that's just my thinking. Hope it helps. And one final point. As far as I'm aware, enlightenment, from everything I've heard from spiritual teachers, is inevitable. So maybe take in the woods as much as you can, because even if it takes 1,000 years to escape the innate suffering of this reality, it eventually will end, and you will no longer be able to experience this world, because essentially you cease to exist in this reality, like supreme enlightenment. You cease to ever be able to participate in the cycle of life, death, and rebirth ever again, to use that perception, or that parlance. And whether you end up with the total annihilation of sense perception and ultimately oneness with God, or just on the path of greater development in another ever greater construct, like we were talking about the infinite nature of the universe, that could also be spiritually relevant. That could be spiritually true as well. The spiritual dimensions could also have infinite capacity. So you could reach nirvana and then only be at the bottom rung of an ever greater chain of development in that reality, and you can only be here in this personal physical reality for so long, because enlightenment is basically inevitable. It's the end result of everyone's existence. So make the most of it, basically.
Yeah.
And I thought that stood out to me as quite poignant and important and relevant to this chat. So yeah, I thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, no, it's useful. I've just got that light coming back.
Oh, the little green one. Oh, it's like your third eye, the green third eye of Marky.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
so that's kind of where I'm at with that. Is like you said, the journey is just as important as the destination. I think the destination is the journey, to a certain extent. It's like there's this guy called Marc who's smoked DMT, apparently quite heavy doses, about 50 times, and he does spoken word poetry, and he writes books and discusses his experiences with what he perceives to be God. And he said things, I think I mentioned this to you before, I can't remember when, but he said, when you're God, there's nothing to do because you are everything. There's nothing to experience. There is ultimately boredom.
Yeah.
It's fucking boring to be God because you are know and exist everywhere and are everything, at least in this universe. And like, the more times he goes there, the more he realizes when he comes back that like your problems are intimately linked. The suffering you experience is intimately linked to your ability to experience this reality. And rather than, with that perspective, rather than seeing suffering as like, oh, this is a reason to escape this reality, just say that's a consequence of the virtue of the beauty of being in this reality. It's your birthright to suffer, but it's also, like we were saying earlier, the parallels, like you can't have light without dark, you can't have happiness without sadness, you can't have suffering without joy. It's not possible. There's not just eternal suffering, and that's maybe where I disagree with Buddhism to a certain extent. I might not be right, I might not be enlightened in that perspective, but
I think the
do you see my
the,
point?
the Bill Hicks roller coaster ride. You know, there's ups and downs, twists and turns. Like life is just a roller coaster. Just gotta ride it.
Yeah. And then when you get off at the end and you return to God and you're in that state of ultimate oneness again, you're like, fuck, I want to do that again. Maybe that's why life, death, and rebirth keeps happening. Maybe that's why we get new souls all the time. Maybe that's why consciousness keeps coming back to this level of reality. It's because it's fucking fun.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. Like, and every one of us, when we go to sleep at night, whether we remember it or not, becomes deity anyway in our dreams. It's just whether we have control over it or not. Like with lucid dreaming, and when you have a fully lucid dream, you can manifest everything. What we think of as God exists in our dreams. We can be that in our dreams. This level of reality, this is non-localized God, or specifically localized God in individual portions. And then beyond that is the greater idea of like, even gods have gods. Do you see what I mean? Thank you for listening to this, because it feels really enjoyable saying these things, and it feels like I'm onto a path, and I'm glad you're nodding in agreement and validating it.
What, me listening?
Yeah. Oh, you weren't listening.
Well, yeah, we're having a Skype conversation. Of course I am.
Oh, good.
You plonker.
Good. So with that in mind, I've kind of covered everything I had my intention to say. So
yeah,
either we can stop there, or if there's things you wanted to ask or tell, I'm all ears, basically.
I don't know. I was going to say with the whole journey destination thing, and what you're saying about our worldly problems and things that we have to do as being, something we shouldn't just try and escape from.
It's either have problems or don't be here, which is what Marc Marcel said.
Yeah, that's it. And
why would you give up the gift of this life just for the sake of not wanting to go to the shops, or it being a ball ache to put on muscle, or like the challenge of trying to eat better, or even real genuine suffering in war-torn areas? Like, in a weird way, like it's harder to understand it from in like someone who's surrounded by literal genuine hell. But we make that that's how God manifests itself. God is every potential, and that becomes manifest within us in our behavior. And like some people, even if it's, do you know what I mean, like if you know you're going back to God, it makes it bearable to suffer those experiences, and there's this look at the drawer where you're born into and where your consciousness goes and stuff like that. And it's just an experience. It's just an experience. And it's harder to see it when you're really suffering, but it's also a lot harder to ignore it when you're really not suffering. That's why enlightenment is blissful, in my opinion.
Because, I think that the Buddhist concept of there is suffering, so then the purpose of meditation is to feel less suffering. Is the remembrance that you don't, that your happiness comes from you. Yeah. And as well as like, I still want to eat ice cream and chocolate because it's gratifying and it makes me happy. that's not the ultimate cause of my happiness.
Yeah. Well, this is something I've been facing a lot, because I've been, since that thing that I did the other day where I nearly died. Like, I've just been like, all I've had is coffee and cigarettes, and that's quite good for me, because like, it's been a very small amount of coffee, less cigarettes, and like normally other things would have been occurring more frequently that I was struggling to keep a lid on. I haven't played video games. I haven't done unmeaningful music. I've created a huge amount of content for this channel, even in the past 2 days. I've been really, it's really opened my eyes a bit, because it's like it could have just ended and I wouldn't have even known about it. That's the thing, that it's like it would have just been like I sucked it off the table, and that was the last thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah,
that's what it felt like, and it gave me this new spark of like, there's got to be something better than this. Fuck this process that I'm going through. Fuck this self-pity. Fuck this. There's no solution to these problems. It's like anything has got to be better than losing this perception of this reality forever.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Because even if I had awoken in heaven or something, or even hell, like it wouldn't have been heaven or hell, because I'd have been thinking, at least until I adjusted to it, if those things even exist, I'd have been regretting what I did, why I died, the life I lived, all these kind of these mistakes I'd made. And like, in all honesty, like, it's something my dad said. It's like, this is basically like your last chance. And I thought to myself, actually, whilst that's true, it's also my first chance. It's the first time I've ever had that conviction of like, I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna do something, even if it doesn't work perfectly. What I've been doing before for the entire rest of my life is being reactionary, solving things, putting plasters on, dealing with the temporary solutions. Whereas, like, for me, I think the actual solution is to at least try to attain spiritual enlightenment. Like, I think that's, even if it's the Zazen level, that's what I'm after. It's like cessation of suffering by cessation of desire.
Yeah.
And like you were saying about chocolate and ice cream, for example, that's giving in to desire. Like, that is, if you look at it rationally and empirically and objectively, it's poison. It's a drug. It's filth, and it feels good and it tastes good, but it's actually poison to a certain extent. I mean, I don't feel that myself, but that's an extreme example of how you could interpret it. And like, these things that fool you into believe, like with psychedelics, or in my case stimulants, they can be useful if used respectfully and in the right way, but I don't use them respectfully and in the right way.
Yeah.
I go mad, I go over the top, I go to the extreme and don't stop until I pass out and nearly die. Like, and like, yeah, it's just drawn me back to this concept again of just like, but yeah, basically it's been quite hopeful. It's like, rather than one last ditch attempt and like, it's, oh god, I'm at the end of my ability to, it's actually, no, this is the first time in probably years where I've accepted that I'm responsible for my own experience, and that I'm also simultaneously a congruence of forces. I'm no more self-aware than an ant, or no more in control of my own thoughts. And this is where meditation and stuff like that and self-revelation comes in, and that ever-present witness, objective observer effect is like, I've been up until now a product of my environment, and I've been willfully doing that, so I don't have to be courageous or don't have to take responsibility for my life.
Yeah.
And running away from my enlightenment or spiritual experiences has been the reason I've been doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Like a junkie's need to fill a hole that never can be filled with the thing they fill it with, until it just destroys everything that you are and you're gone. Like, Russell Brand said an interesting thing. He was like, with things like heroin, for example, you will just give it every part of yourself. You'll sell your arm. You'll cut your fucking arm off. You'll inject yourself until you lose limbs, and you will give it everything until you've got nothing left except one last thing, and then you'll offer that as well, which is your life.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not in that extreme a case, but it rung home to me massively. Is like, I'm trying to fill a void with something that is fake.
Yeah.
Like even psychedelics, like they can be a lovely window, but they're never a permanent solution.
Yeah, and I think so you're talking about drugs specifically, but then what I was talking about, like chocolate and ice cream, is like some people have a problem, they can't stop eating.
Yeah, I know people with eating disorders.
Other people are addicted to all sorts of emotions and feelings and the past and
depression. Depression is a form of very complex addiction and training. Yeah, like the past. Yeah. But sorry, I was just trying to validate what you were saying. Go on.
And I suppose anxiety is being too stuck in the future, being not present. But yeah, what I was
anxiety can also be wanting control and a lack of acceptance, a lack of fearlessness, and a lack of courage at a very fundamental level, because you've trained your brain to be like that. Yeah. And then, like the body, like we talked about before, with like the peptides and the physiological request from your body for your brain to have these thoughts, so it gets the hormones to perpetuate itself.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And your body has to keep doing things over and over again for it to start thinking that's the best way to do things.
Well, it's like smoking, for example. Like I go to the kitchen 30, 40 times a day to go in the garden to smoke, and like I won't even be aware I've got up to go and smoke until the cigarette has ended, and I'm like, oh, I want another one. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So and it's just like a huge part of my consciousness that is devoted to the process of smoking. Yeah. And like some people can have a fag and it satisfies them, whereas with me it's just it at some conscious level it's like I've submitted my willpower to these cravings, and I'm not like everyone else to a certain extent, whereby I have the willpower yet to stop doing these things. I haven't trained myself to exert my desire, my mental willpower, my mind over matter. I haven't got the ability to tell myself what I want to do. I'm at the whim of my body and my compulsions and my cravings, and that's why I want to stop substances. Yeah. And just addictive behavior like gaming and basically anything that I feel like I have to do it to feel normal. Like a bit like in, like I was talking to Eddie about this before with OCD. It's like you feel like if you don't do that thing, it can't be normal, and sometimes you have to do that thing endlessly until you're just caught in a loop, and that's what addiction sort of is. It's an addiction in not like, I'm not saying OCD is an addiction, but it manifests in similar ways of like repetitive behaviors that never gratify. Martin was talking about this on the last podcast we did. He was saying like you need to get his opinion of my circumstances. I need to get to the point where I am in control and choose to do these things. I paraphrase what he said, but choosing to do these things because they enhance my life rather than being controlled by the need to do them. Yeah, which is the essence of addiction, really.
Yeah. I was in relation to that and addiction stuff. Like I suppose another video I saw about meditation was that your mind, when you start to do it, it's the last thing it wants to do. Yeah. Is like not have external things to do. You've got to just stop, and that's like a really difficult process for the mind. But then if you keep at it, the more and more you do it, the more you find that is your new addiction. Like that's your new
it fools the mind into thinking that, because essentially the mind is the thing that disappears. You still have it, but it loses its dominance when you attain these enlightened states or these altered higher states. And so, of course, it doesn't want to relinquish that control, because until you have an ego dissolution or a higher state, you think you are your mind. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? Like even growing up as a child, like where you first realise that you have, or like even later in adulthood when you reach the mature ego stage, where like you realise that you have thoughts, but you're not your thoughts. You have an identity, but you're not your identity, which is where you get these higher cognitive states.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with the mind. It's like training the mind, tricking the mind into believing that it's good for it, by making it a new addiction, giving it a reward, which is these bliss and these egoic and self-oriented, and I mean self in terms of the self, gratification experiences, which is the desire to be enlightened, the desire for release. But when you attain it, the mind's gone anyway.
It's kind of,
and it's still there available, but it's not dominant anymore, in the same way that the ego or the self ceases to be your point of reference.
What I find interesting as well is like it's like taking the, you know, it's taking your power back. It's like taking control back from your mind, but it takes the control from an impermanent place to a permanent place, because the world is impermanent, and if you try and control the world, you'll only cause problems for yourself, because
it's impossible to exert. It's impossible to be God in the Christian terms of God, for example. Like, you can't become that form of what God is. You can't become the all-powerful creator of the universe. You can accept that you are that, but your ego, yourself, you that you are, your identity, can't do anything more than copy what God is until it just ceases to be. And that's when you reach that enlightened state, is when, as far as I gather, based on what research I've done, it's like relinquishing. Yeah, did you follow what I meant? Was that relevant?
Yeah, I think I was saying it more in terms of, like, you know, like, ultimately we all have a fear of death and permanence, because, you know, we're all getting older and everything's slowly decaying, and entropy, you know, like entropy is like going to happen, but our true selves, our consciousness is permanent. It's like our ego is constantly changing, and our faces are constantly changing, our thoughts and perceptions. So when we try and take control of those impermanent things, they're only going to change. And I think meditation, it helps you to.
Well, that which can be permanent is that state of non-dualism.
Taking control of something that is centered and always here, and then that's a much healthier thing to try and take control of, rather than like how you look every day and like, or, you know, making sure that something is a certain way, or
even trying to stop yourself thinking a thought. That's a very prime example of how that works. Is like, you have if you sit and observe your thoughts, it becomes quickly apparent that you have no control over those thoughts. All you can choose is to react to them, reprogram them, reframe them until they cease to be generated. Exactly. But you don't have any conscious involvement in what pops into your head. Like now, it might be a green banana, but it also might be a giant lump of cheese, or it could be sudden enlightenment just going bang into your head. But you can't choose that.
No.
It's just phenomena that you experience. All you can do, the only finite position, the only infinite position, is your perspective, is observation itself. That's the Atman. That's as close as we can get to God, because God is everything, and the only way we can get close to even resembling that is to just literally observe without trying to exert any will. And that's when your desires drop away. That's when your compulsions drop away. That's when your need for control drops away. And you get this sensation, I gather again, from what I've just studied, that like everything is as it should be. It gives you that sense of like, this is how it's supposed to be. Like I've had this most poignantly after coming around from a DMT trip. Where I woke up and I was like, this. I sort of laughed. I was just like, oh, this sense of profound peace and serenity and acceptance has always been there,
Yeah.
And I've been so trapped in trying to attain it that I ignored the fact that I already had it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how I kind of, again, how I relate to what enlightenment must feel like, and that's my own things that I feel where I come close to that. That's what it feels like. That serenity, that acceptance, that non-craving, that just for that moment. That's why I say drugs aren't a permanent solution. Even the best drugs, even the most effective ones, aren't a long-term solution, because eventually they wear off.
Yeah. Of course.
But they can show you what to aim for, and then when you have that experience, and those visionary states, or the sensations, or the gratification, or just the release of that experience, then that gives you a goal, and then the rest of your life should be to work towards to make that permanent, like you were saying. To almost accept that peace and bliss and serenity and acceptance is your fundamental perception of reality when you are just the observer, and everything else is just the phenomena arising in the observable reality.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. Well put.
Thank you. Okay, I need the loo and a coffee, but if you want to carry on in a bit, I'm more than happy to. Thank you for prompting me, listening, contributing. Thank you for being on the channel. And
been a pleasure. Varsha good.
Indeed, I don't know what that means, but I assume it means something to the effect of very good, or very okay, or very, very pleasurable, or something.
Means be so good in Swedish.
Be so good. I should try. I shall try my best. Regards to Almina as well, and yeah, I will catch up. I'm going to end the video and then I'll say goodbye properly. So just wave at the camera.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye YouTube. Bye.